Well, right now, let's plunge into Nigeria's economic growth. Of course, you know that last year we were informed that Nigeria went into recession, and we have since escaped the recession. How significant is that to the Africa continent or free trade area, which took off at the beginning of this year? Professor Banji Oyeyinka joins us this morning from our studios in Abuja. He is special advisor to the president of the AFDB on industrialization. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Prof. Well, economy, economy is always something that we can only hope that will help to take out the challenges that we are confronted with. My colleague this morning in our opening chat, referenced some figures that are not pleasant, and I'm sure they are concerning for you. The unemployment figures, the poverty figures, the hunger figures, and so many, all kinds of figures, and not just at the federal level, but at the states level as well. And those things are there on the one hand. On the other hand, are policies, programs, and efforts of government to tackle these things. If you would take a panoramic view of the challenges of the economy, before we go into the AFCFTA conversation, what would it be for you? What would be the main challenge we have for you? Why these figures seem to be undulating more in the negative than in the positive?
Thank you so much, Ayo. Let me take a historical view. With 50 years of development experience now in our country, we have done the same thing for 5 decades, and it's not working. In other words, we've been dependent on oil as the main source of foreign exchange earning. As you can see, for example, the foreign reserve is always an indicator of the health of the country's trade. This is what we have done. But there are critical issues with that kind of dependency. One is that a mineral or oil-dependent economy is always an antithesis to structural change. And I'm mentioning structural change because all economies need to begin to shift away from what you might describe as low-level equilibrium economy to high equilibrium economy. And that's why you find those figures that you are reeling out. When an economy for too long depends on subsistence agriculture, the productivity is extremely very low. You are not
But I'm pretty sure that we'll get Professor Oyeyinka back in no time to be able to look at those, not just look at the figures, but deal with the issues and have proper conversation. Because, one of the things that you hear a number of people say is that the opportunities in the country, the business opportunities in Nigeria, to use the words of Professor Adie of NAFDAC, the negatives far outweigh, the positives far outweigh the negatives. Otherwise, why are so many foreigners pouring into the country when things don't seem to be going, well?
Well, in terms of potential, I mean, let's be honest. Nigeria's economy has it. It has it. I mean, so much potentials. And I think for a lot of people, they probably see 5, 10 years from now, if things are done right. So it's important to actually invest early. I mean, when the indices are still favorable, when the foreign exchange is in favor of those coming from outside. I mean, you saw the headline saying that the depreciation makes it more expensive now to service our loans. So basically, for a lot of people, I saw another report saying that it's now cheaper for a lot of people outside the country to buy property right here in the country because of the value of the naira. So it's understandable, that is the thinking. But, he was speaking about the historical perspective, and thankfully we have Prof back. So, Prof, if you could just pick up from where you left, where the network failed, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Because what you hear these days is about building back, building stronger. And when the idea of building means there's structural issues that we have to deal with. So this is my takeoff point from where you ended your question the other time. The structure of the economy has to be rebuilt. And I mentioned two critical foundations. One is the dependence on oil. We need to pivot away from that. And I'm sure people have said it many times, but you can't stop talking about it. Why? Because an oil-dependent economy doesn't create jobs. It's an enclave. It's localized within certain area, and it doesn't create as much jobs as, say, for example, manufacturing or industry. Number two is that an oil-dependent economy also fosters certain kinds of institutions around which there are greed and grievances. When you have an economy that is easily controlled by a very small group of people, you end up with what you might call an extractive dependent economy. So this is really, for me, the foundation that we need to rebuild. We need to pivot away from an oil-dependent economy that is not working. In 2019, all Nigeria got from oil was maybe about $40 billion. South Korea, monthly export is over $50 billion because it went from being a rural agric economy into a manufacturing economy. We need to continually say this, that no country ever since the Industrial Revolution got rich without industrializing its economy. So, and the second dimension of dependency is also the subsistence agriculture. Colonial masters encourage us to keep on exporting, commodities, cocoa and all that, which is fine. But in doing that, we also ignored what we should be eating, the basic grains, rice, cassava, and all that. So we have a double dependency on our hand, in which, for example, when the oil prices crashed, we didn't have money to import anything, including drugs. But at the same time, we needed to eat, and we couldn't eat. So the local economy, domestic economy for food also was not there because we depended on others to feed us. So I think this twin issue has to be emphasized, and we need to really take a hard look at ourselves. And this is why the African Development Bank is conducting this new round of appraisal. I'm sure you've seen in the news. Colleagues have gone around over the last 2 weeks confirming the locations. It is real now. It's not about talk. The bank is working very closely with federal government, finance, agri, water resources to build special agro-industrial processing zones across the country. And we are hoping and praying that, this is going to begin to happen this year.
Well, Prof, the issue...
What we are doing is to rebuild.
Yes. The issue, if you ask me, is not whether or not, Nigeria has the potential, as Kayode said earlier, as far as investment, even the agriculture that you're talking about, that potential is there. That is not the issue. Because, and then since you have gone historical, perhaps you may also want to take us back to the present gradually. Historically, agriculture was a mainstay for the different regions of this country. Over the years, a number of people will talk about military interregnum, which informed, the gradual depletion of our concentration on our agriculture. But I also remember that from the late 70s, there were efforts, even by the military government under Obasanjo at the time, to return Nigeria to the glory days of agriculture with the Operation Feed the Nation, which became which transmuted into Green Revolution in the Second Republic. And over the years, successive governments made little efforts to draw our attention back to agriculture. All those were policies. And even now, we have policies tapering towards returning Nigeria to agriculture and helping us focus away from that mineral dependence, oil dependence that you talked about. What then is the problem? If the policies are there and implementation one way or another is going on, and of course, organizations like AFDB are making efforts along the same line. What then is the issue? Why is it so slow, so to speak?
So, look, talk is not a strategy. People talk. Every day in our country, you see someone comes out, they say something, but after a month or two, you hear nothing. When you speak, you have to back it up with action. And that's what you are referring to. They have been policies. The policies actually meant well. I believe the OBG revolution actually meant well. He was very serious. But you have to carry it through. This is really, when I qualify my word with, we are hoping and we are praying, that we carry it through. There is an affliction, if I may put it that way, in our country where we start things and we never finish it. So this is really the problem. It's nothing to do, right from the 70s, the national development plans were beautiful. They are comparable to anyone you see anywhere in the world. But you have to carry it through and do it. And this speaks to the power of our bureaucracy and our politics also. So looking for where did it go wrong? We have to look at the influences of the bureaucracy, the influences of the politics. I have been part of many programs in this country. I can give you examples upon examples. I was part of those who started Ajaokuta in 1979. We got somewhere, and then politics interjected. Of course, we had in 1982 austerity measures that intervened because, again, of oil crash. And these are the lessons we should go back and learn. And this is the lesson we're actually learning from now and saying, look, we should never make these mistakes again. But to be honest with you, at the back of everything, at the back of all the failures, for me, politics had always been the major issue for economic development. Politicians, bureaucrats. And we have to say it to ourselves. And I'm not afraid to say to anyone, it has always been. We are brilliant people, we have opportunities. Nobody is potential, as Dr. Adesina is always saying. The potentials are there. But we have left the structure of our economy so vulnerable that every time there is some external shock, we are back to square one. And the kind of shock you find with this COVID, for example, is even far more difficult to deal with. Because what happens, anytime there's a shock like this, you set the economy back 5, 7, 10 years. For example, we are exiting recession, but what does that mean, actually? Growing at 1%?
But before we go there...
population growth is growing at 2-point-something%. So this is the issue. We have to complete what we start.
Yeah, before we go, to, those economic language, so to speak, when you say structural issues, and you've repeated it over time, exactly what are you talking about? What are the structural issues that we have?
Number one is that Nigeria started at independence as a subsistence agricultural economy. You expect that after 15, 20 years, we will have transited from that phase and begin to move to a situation where we have a more dynamic industrial economy, including industrial agriculture, as I've been saying many times. We have to transit from there, and that's what every economy did. Let me give you a concrete example. So you grow cotton, for example. You grow cotton. From cotton, you make textiles. And we saw Aswani, we saw all those big industries. There was a particular Nigerian company that was employing almost 1 million Arewa textile in those days. Where are they today? Gone. Gone. So that's what I mean by structural issues. So you have to move gradually from one level of technological and industrial capabilities of certain skills level to another. Those who, for example, developed the vaccine today, they didn't wake up one day. Developing a vaccine in 1 year is akin to a miracle, actually. It takes 3, 4, 5 years. But because they have accumulated certain levels of technological capabilities, they have retained people with knowledge, with experience, who are able to be deployed in a minute to do those things. They're able to do it. Where are they in our country? Gone. Everybody's gone. All the good people, I mean, we're all here, some of us are here, but you look at the science labs, you look at universities, you look at everywhere. Where I was at OAU, they were doing great things everywhere. So structure, that's what I mean by structure. So you move from subsistence agriculture into industrial and into services. What has happened in our country, let me finish the idea of structure. So what has happened now is that we totally jumped the industrial phase. And I can give you figures and I can give you graphs to show it. We moved, because telecom came, thankfully, I mean, it's a very big area. Services, for example, financial services, telecom, like you are doing, there is a big part of the economy. But the transition from agriculture must go through agriculture, must go to industrial and to services. What has happened in Africa, as with Nigeria, is that we simply jumped that industrial phase. So a lot of people talk about leapfrogging. I don't really identify with that phrase. You can't jump it. You can't build a house without a foundation. You know, services, agriculture, and they are closely connected. So therefore, we don't make anything ourselves. We don't produce. This is the crux of the matter. We don't produce. Our garments, textile, all gone. Leather, we ship off them to somewhere else and they call it Moroccan leather or something. Wow. You know, we still import starch where OBJ started the cassava revolution. By now, Nigeria should be making industrial on a large scale. So structurally, and that's what I mean by the structure of an economy, in sectoral terms, there are 3 critical sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. Nations, great nations, transited from agriculture into industry, into services. It doesn't mean that they ignored agriculture. It does mean that they actually industrialized their agriculture. They moved from hoe and cutlasses to combined harvesters, to tractors, to all of that, such that you find the manufacturing contribution to agriculture simply just labor contribution to agriculture just nosedived, right, and the surplus labor moved to industry, or what you call industry as a category.
You know, I think it's quite interesting.
By the structure of the economy, yes.
Well, I like the picture you're painting, really. I mean, when you talk about agriculture, industry, and services, and agriculture and industry, they're meant to be some sort of foundation. So as it stands now, yes, we might be doing well in that services area, at least in the context of Africa, but you say that the foundation, agriculture and industry, is still quite shaky. And that takes me to my next question, because when you talked about Ajaokuta, I mean, it raised eyebrows, because that has been one major challenge. An industry, or at least a company that we thought would mean well for Nigeria, would boost Nigeria's chances. And when you look at the challenges that manufacturers have, a couple of them really, and you see that one of them is unavailability of raw materials locally and the need for development of machine industry, iron and steel. So Ajaokuta falls in that category. And I want to try and see if we can match what government is doing with, you know, that faulty foundation to be sure they're at least going in the right direction or not. So recently, there's been a lot of chatter specifically about Ajaokuta, you know, going back to the original builders, trying to, you know, partner with them to ensure that it is up and running. So specifically for that, because that's a major challenge, you know, manufacturers have, would you say that the government is moving in the right direction to at least get Ajaokuta back to what it should be, so we can have a good foundation in that area?
The Ajaokuta as we have it, let's not deceive ourselves. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. It's like you buy a Volkswagen car, you park it for 50 years or 40 years. You wake up one day and then you say you are going to refurbish it and start running around. I don't know whether you've listened to almost every minister of, I don't know what they call them, iron and steel or whatever. Every minister comes, they run around to Ajaokuta, some of them cry, and then they come and they tell you, oh, we're going to resuscitate Ajaokuta. Have you ever seen anything happen since OBJ? Every single minister. You can count them on your fingertip. I've had cause actually to write memos to people in those places to say, look, why are we doing this? So what am I saying? Yes, we need a metallic industry. We need a strong petrochemical industry. And thank God for Alhaji Dangote's petrochemicals. That's probably one of the foundational structure that we missed. We were all excited that we're going to have, because when you have a metallic base for industry, you can make machine tools, you can make everything. So it becomes far easier for horizontal integration of the economy. If you need some tool, you can go to the next factory, you can do it, you can order. But when you don't have that foundation, everything has to be imported. And again, this is where it comes in about what is it, why are we not diversified? Why are we relying on oil? So when you are not able to make it domestically, you don't have an autonomous capability to make it yourself, you rely on others. And that's where the problem comes. So this vertical dependency on others to get your metal, to get your chemical, to get your fertilizer, this is what has undermined the growth of the Nigerian economy in a very fundamental way. So this is the point I'm making about the structures. The founding fathers meant well. If Ajaokuta, Delta, and all those had worked well, Nigeria would be at a very different level today. As I said to you, I was a participant. I was a witness to it. And what wrecked those programs was not the technical capability. After all, we started with POSCO. POSCO is Pyongyang Steel Company of Korea. We started with them almost the same year, 1970. We started 71, this side 1970. Almost the same year. You go and check, you can Google it. POSCO is probably one of the most dynamic steel companies in the world today. The World Bank told them at that time, don't do it, just stick with your radio, stick with your textile. They told Korea. It's all in history books for those who know how to read. They told them, they ignored them. They ignored them and they went ahead. POSCO, Korea today is the biggest shipbuilder in the world. They are one of the biggest steel producers. You know their cars, the Kia, the Samsung, and all of that. They came out of the metallic and chemical industry. This was where we wanted to be. This was where Nigeria was supposed to go. But politics trumped everything. This is the truth. But I believe that we can rebuild this economy. We can people always say a country is not going to die tomorrow or next year like human beings. Nothing is too late. And this COVID has shown us that we need to rebuild this economy, build back better and stronger.
Well,
so,
Professor,
for me, in a nutshell, I don't like to talk about Ajaokuta because it's like a hole in your heart. But this is the truth. Anyone who is telling you that is telling you a lie.
Well, there are so many things that you have said in the little time that we have had, but you have told us that we can rebuild this economy. How do we do that? We'll take that on when we return from this break. Oh, thanks for staying with us. Professor Banji Oyeyinka is still with us in our Abuja studio. Well, Prof, if you don't mind, clearly, every successive government has, as you said, made efforts to jumpstart, again, the Ajaokuta project. And it is critical. You would agree. I mean, because if we are able to solve that part, a whole chunk of infrastructural development would be addressed, at least something possible at home, as opposed to having to import many of these things. So if you don't mind us just taking it from there in terms of the rebuilding process that you talked about. Because just as you know, and everyone has told us, infrastructure, we have a huge deficit. How significantly do you think the Ajaokuta project can help to bridge the gap? And what do we need to do?
So, Ajaokuta, you mean, is synonymous with iron and steel. By the way, we have two integrated steel plants. Right? One was in Delta, which is the Alaja Steel Company, and then we had the Ajaokuta Steel Company. And I'm told that the one in Delta is actually been bought by a private company and is working. I haven't been there, but I think we need to check it out. I think government need to re-examine that. My worry about the Ajaokuta is the way, people have played with it. So you said successful governments had made effort. I'm not sure about effort. I'm not sure about whether people really understood what needed to be done, or whether I don't know what has happened. Why it never worked, but it never worked. So what I would say is, if there's someone who wants to really revitalize that plant, it should be done on a public sector basis, a private sector basis. This is, for me, one of the ways that we can solve this issue of rent, because people just see Ajaokuta as a place to extract rent. But without knowing the full details, but what I heard in the early days was that a lot of the equipment have been cannibalized. Many of them had been shipped away. Many had been lost through theft. If you want to go back to a technology that is almost 40 years old or more, you have a lot of work to do. So the location itself could be the beginning of a resolution of that issue. But the business model has to be different. This is the point I would like to make. Let's find a different business model to do it. Let's re-examine the one in Alaja also, and see how government, enable it, but private sector drive it. That's the way I would like to see it. By the way, we also had like 3 wire rod mills and so forth. One in Osogbo, Katsina, and another one in Delta. So, but I will say that I think what government should do is, explicitly back the development of this metallic industry, but not get involved in running it. Governments can't run business. Government doesn't have capability to run. It's not trained to do it. Bureaucrats are not trained to do it. So this is a lesson for us, a very painful lesson that we learned over the years, and we shouldn't make that mistake again. Nobody should come from some ministry and say, we want to resuscitate a plan, we are sending our people there. They can't do it. Let's put in place the structures in terms of policy framework for a private person to come and do it in a transparent way, not putting obstacles in people's way. So that's for me will be the best thing to do. And also for the same thing with the chemical industry. By the way, they are twin sides of the same coin. The metallics and the chemicals.
All right.
You have to also rebuild the chemical, which include pharmaceuticals. See how we are running around begging for vaccine. But Nigeria, I'm told by one professor of virology that we actually produced a human vaccine in 1991. Right now, Vaughan, despite all the neglect of all the scientific research agencies, they still produce animal vaccines. So the point is that we need to find a different framework.
Right.
We need to deploy our best people. We need to take politics out of business, out of the economics, as much as we can. Because it seems to me that third world economics is always bumped off by politics, by nepotism, by cronyism. This is what we've learned. It's not a theory. It's what we've learned over the years. So yes, I support your point, we should rebuild. Rebuilding starts from there. Rebuilding starts from putting in place a framework for people to come and do it. Nigerians are ready to do it. We've got
Right.
many offers, for example, for the agro zones. Nigerians want to come. And we're hoping that we'll be able to ensure that people actually are allowed to do it. Mark my word, allowed to do it.
Well, and I believe
This is
that
the key.
that allowing or allowance would largely come from the government. So let's focus more, as you said. Government should not be in business, but government has a role in ensuring that the environment is conducive and ensure that those policies are not just mere statements; they're really followed through. And looking at the challenges that manufacturers have in the country. They talk about difficulty in accessing forex for importation of raw materials. I mean, they wouldn't have had to import if we had it in the country. So forex is a major challenge. Talk about high cost of power, and that's due to the recent, increase in electricity tariff. Of course, also the recent increase in price of petrol. And they also talk about high cost of transportation. I mean, we could talk about insecurity and how that affects transportation. There's low demand of manufactured goods in the country, which is also a major challenge for them. They talk about, minimum wage challenges. I mean, workers not being able to afford some of these things. Talk about VAT as well, from 5% to 7.5%. They talk about high cost of shipping due to erosion in Naira foreign exchange. And they talked about the steel and iron import and all that. So they have a lot of challenges around them. And if we want to be competitive in AFTA, which is already in place, we need the environment to be conducive. And if you take a look at our exports, our goods exports, it dropped from 444 billion in 2019 to just 129 billion in the fourth quarter of 2020. And who knows what we'll see in this first quarter of 2021, because those challenges are still there. So if you were to pick a priority for government, if maybe government is saying this is too much for us to handle, what would you say is the first challenge government should tackle, at least to make the environment more conducive for manufacturers?
You cannot pick and choose. I think the key is to that allowance to examine our ways, if I may put it that way. We just need to examine our ways. All of these are under what the World Bank and call ease of doing business framework. We just need to have a new mindset, particularly those who have the power within the bureaucracy, within the agencies who are in charge of all of this, have the right mindset and see Nigeria in a very different light. One of my own pet theories is that because the pie is too small, everyone is hanging on to some very small pie this idea of sharing instead of building, and instead of adding to the size of the pie. So every person, everyone who has an opportunity somewhere, simply hang on to this is the pie to eat. Nigeria should not be seen in that way. We can build this country to a point where, we won't have the kind of level of poverty that we are. So what am I saying about the ease of doing business is a full framework. It's about governance and it's about institutions. Institutions, by the way, is different from organizations. Organizations are those agencies set up to run things on a daily basis. But institutions are these patterns and regularities of behavior. For example, you have someone who actually doesn't have a mindset to do what is right, running something that should be run right. I'm sure you know what I mean. So institutions is about people. It's about laws, our rules, both formal and informal. Sometimes informal behaviors are the ones that sabotage formal rules. You put a rule in place, for example, that don't harass anyone coming through the port. Don't spend more than 3 days to clear a certain set of goods. But then you have a particular officer who stands in the way and say, well, you are not going to move an inch if you don't do so and so and so. And that's contrary to the law. So the informal behavior trumps the formal rules. So this is that's what I'm saying. We need a change of mind. We need somebody to enforce the rules, to say, if you misbehave on this, you go to jail. Because we see that people get away with anything. Somebody does something wrong, and then they pick up a phone, call somebody, and they, oh, leave him alone. So, and then recently, for example, someone was calling us and telling us about the export zone in Ogun State. That special export zone was set up with certain rules and regulations. And this person said, oh, now they said, so because the country doesn't have money, you have to now pay what you weren't paying. So basically tariff regulations. You can't just break a rule just because you have an issue. You have to have a sanctity of contract. You have to respect the rules. So you are talking about some of these. Apart from the hard infrastructure, in which we have a huge deficit, there's also the soft infrastructure. You ask some people, they say, look, Nigeria has opportunities. You started with that in your review. Huge opportunity. No, who wouldn't want to come to a country with 200 million market? But then they come, and then we put all kinds of barriers, and people just leave. We have one of the least foreign investment flow into any of our productive sectors. Yes, they'll go to oil, but they don't want to go anywhere because they say, oh, well, this place is too difficult. So we need a change of mindset. We need to change our ways, and we need to talk to ourselves. Look ourselves in the mirror and stop, trying to lie to ourselves. The soft part is actually the most insidious of people, of officers, of this. I don't want to mention any organization. Everything, somebody wants to extract a rent. This is what is causing our problem.
Just one thing on this same after that you talked about. With all the information that you have given us, even from the question that Kaude asked, added to the issues that have been raised in several quarters, that there are fears that Nigeria may be a dumping ground as a result of AFTA because of in the process of the implementation. Do you see a risk of AFTA jeopardizing Nigeria's economy in the light of some of the things, the shortfalls that you have talked about?
Nigeria should be the biggest beneficiary because we have all it takes. And that's why the rebuilding has to start and accelerate. I believe very much in Nigeria. I believe very much in the power to do things. And of course, this is the message of Easter. After darkness, there will come light. Yes, Nigeria should not be a dumping ground. And the only way we can prevent that is for us to also be a manufacturing hub. And this is what we are trying to do, starting with the cluster approach. We are taking a cluster-based approach into agribusiness. And by the way, as I said, agriculture, we are not going to do it the ways our forefathers did agriculture. We want to do agribusiness. Agribusiness is huge. By 2030, the estimate for agribusiness in Africa is $1 trillion. It's huge. Globally, agribusiness is $8 trillion. It's bigger than IT. It's bigger than iron and steel. So we're in a good place because we have all the ingredients. We just need to make it work. So this is what we are pushing, and we want to do it properly. We have started with 4 zones. We started with 6 states, but we are going to reach every state. We are not ignoring any state. We are just doing it according to the books. Those whose documents are ready, we are already starting. So you might have seen stories this week, people saying 6 days. No, it's just the beginning. So as your document is ready, we just keep pushing into it. So I believe that we will rebuild, we can rebuild, and we should be determined to rebuild this country. We have no other country. Okay.
Well, the only one sharing thing that you said, among several others, is that Nigeria should not be a dumping ground, and consequently, we should do everything we can to prevent that. We have to thank you very much this morning, Professor Banji Oyeyinka, for being our guest this morning and sharing your thoughts with us. He's Special Advisor to the President of the AFDB on Industrialization. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts.